Hello everyone. With our revision of NCERT Human Geography 12th Standard, now I am devoting this video towards the study of economic activities. Now the chapters divided for economic activities includes primary activities that essentially goes with agriculture, and towards the end of the chapter there is also the mention of mining, though I will not be covering that in this particular video. Agriculture, the primary activity, also referred as reproductive industry, has got different types, and all these types correlates not just with the technique that they apply to cultivate crops, rear animals. It is also distinguished on the basis of the constituent, like cultivation of different types of crops, combination of crops with livestock, or it is the areas where we are cultivating it. So we classify agriculture not just on the basis of what is the technique or type, but also what are the constituents. With the maps, excellent maps that we have got in NCERT, areas of agriculture also becomes easier. Please do remind that the first video on human geography, we talked about 5 themes of geography. One of the themes talked about region. So we will not just be learning what are the types of agriculture, what are the techniques of agriculture, what are the constituents of agriculture, but also what are agricultural regions of the world, which are the areas where certain type of agriculture is practiced. So without wasting any time, we are getting on to our NCERT 12th standard. So primary activities, chapter number 5 that we are picking up here, and the primary activities includes different categories of population with different levels of technology utilization. Our NCERT begins saying human activities which generates income are known as economic activities, and primary activities are directly dependent on environment as these refer to utilization of earth's resources as land, water, vegetation, building material, minerals. And that is the reason primary activities includes hunting and gathering. Needless to emphasize that hunting and gathering will be practiced by primitive people, written right here. It also includes pastoral activity, which is related to animals, which can be both primitive as well as developed. Similarly, we can have fishing, forestry, agriculture, mining and quarrying. So if I take pastoral or fishing and also agriculture, I actually can take them at variable levels of economic development. So primary activities essentially correlates with extraction from nature, and that is the reason when we talk about primary activities, we correlate it with extractive, mining, lumbering, as well as reproductive. Crop cultivation. This is how we take the reference of this particular chapter. Now we need to start with the primitive activities as per our NCERT. So the first and the foremost comes up for us as hunting and gathering. So the earliest human being subsisted on animals which they hunted and the edible plants which they gathered from forest in the vicinity. Now when we talk about hunting and gathering, we can easily understand that gathering and hunting are the oldest economic activity known. These are carried on at different levels with different orientations. Gathering is practiced in the region with harsh climatic conditions. It often involves primitive society. Gathering is practiced in high latitude zone, including northern Canada. As soon as I take northern Canada, the primitive people that comes into our reference will take that in the account of map as well. Eskimos. Eskimos are considered to be the primitive native dwellers of Canada which are engaged in gathering. It is also in northern Eurasia and southern Chile, low latitude zone as Amazon Basin, tropical Africa, as well as fringes of Australia. Now before we take anything beyond, we need to justify it on the map. So let us get on to the map. I see this map of subsistence gathering. I am noticing it in the Arctic belt of Canada. This is where hunting gathering as practiced by Eskimos. In northern Eurasia, including Siberia, here we have got primitive population like Lapps and Samoyeds. We have the subsistence gathering in Congo Basin. Congo Basin is essentially known for pygmies. We identify it in Amazon Basin of Brazil. Amazons are considered to be the primitive hunting gathering population. Similarly, in Australia, though area is very small, it's largely in south central Australia, we are talking about Bindibus. Bindibus are also considered to be aborigines. These are also considered to be engaged in gathering. Now what you need to understand is gathering is where the human population is simply extracting either the vegetable or any type of vegetation for that matter, any vegetative support, plant supported food item from nature. It can also include the activity of hunting. Hunting automatically involves animals. But NCERT gives us one interesting fact along with it, and what is that? In the modern times, some gathering is market oriented and has become commercial. Gatherers collect valuable plants as leaves, barks of the trees, medicinal plant, and after simple processing sells the product in the market. Now when we talk about these and some examples that are being mentioned, rubber, gums, resin, there are different varieties of tannin extracts and cork, leaf supply for beverages, etc. But when we talk about these development, we need to understand that gathering has a little chance of becoming important at global level. Reason being, product of such activities cannot compete the world market. So if I have to take note of what we have learned, what we have understood as the pinpointing reference of hunting and gathering, that hunting and gathering, going back to map, that hunting and gathering will be practiced in the areas of unfavorable climate where primitive population lives. These populations are essentially called fourth world communities. Though there has been a range of commercial edge that has been generated for these activities, it doesn't have a global possibility. Because at such primitive level, any type of production will not be in the position of competing with the global market. So it is largely which type? Gathering is essentially subsistence type. And subsistence type is essentially applied to denote self-consumption. I am producing, I am gathering, I am hunting for my self-consumption. So essential match for gathering will be subsistence type. Comes in primary activity number 2, and the primary activity number 2 is pastoralism. It is basically correlates to domestication of animals. Now depending on the geographical factors and technological development, animal rearing today is practiced either on subsistence or at commercial level. So when I have to pick up the meaning of the term pastoralism as a primary activity, I'll say it is essentially related to animal-centric activity which involves two prominent types. One is called herding and two is called rearing, and this difference you need to understand. Rest of the things are not very difficult because NCERT emphasizes on that we are dependent on animals. Anything that is related to livestock can either be subsistence or commercial. But when I talk about subsistence, there are two more types which cannot be ignored: herding and rearing. Herding is where you are more primitive with your activities, as in you are not taking care of health, hygiene, feed, fodder of your animals. We are as humans dependent on animals, and animals are dependent on natural pastures. This is where we take nomadic herding. So let us take the details from NCERT. Nomadic herding, that is part A. Nomadic herding or pastoral nomadism is a primitive subsistence activity in which herders relies on animal for food, clothing, shelter, tool and transport. They tend to move from one place to other along with their livestock. Each nomadic community occupies well-identified territory as the matter of tradition. Pastoral nomadism is associated with three important regions: Atlantic shore of North Africa, eastward across Arabian Peninsula to Mongolia in central China, and region number 2, putting on a star mark to it, extends in tundra region of Eurasia. In the southern hemisphere, there is a small area in southwest Africa and island of Madagascar. If I have to take nomadic herding, I am largely correlated to which type of people? Primitive people. What is the characteristics of nomadic herding? Nomadic herding is where natural pastures are the support system for animals and humans are dependent on the animals for almost every of their requirement. If I have to make sense with the areas mentioned in NCERT, Bedouins of Sahara Desert, Maasais of African Savannah, Mongols or Kazakhs of Central Asia, and here we have got reindeer herders. We have already taken few names as Lapps and Somaids, wherein Somaids can also be counted into the reindeer herders category. The area that I notice in southern part of Africa, this patch is, and of course Madagascar, this largely correlates with milch cattle herding. By primitive population. So how do I take nomadism or nomadic herding as the characteristics? Nomadic herding is you are nomads. Nomads are the population who don't have permanent settlement. So humans are dependent on animals and animals are dependent on natural setup. There is a complete absence of any health, hygiene, feed, fodder care in this type of pastoral nomadism or livestock centric agriculture. Before we proceed further, primary activity in which human population is engaged includes hunting and gathering, where you are dependent either on the natural plant vegetation or you are dependent on the natural life forms precisely to hunt and exist. Comparatively improved is livestock centric or livestock dependent primary activity, which can be either nomadism or livestock rearing. We have learned nomadism, we want now to learn livestock rearing, the commercial livestock rearing. Unlike nomadic herding, the commercial livestock rearing is more organized and capital intensive. Commercial livestock ranching is essentially associated with Western culture and is practiced on permanent ranches. These ranches cover large area and divided into number of parcels which are fenced to regulate the grazing. That is the reason whenever we talk about commercial livestock ranching, we talk about isolated settlements, because in isolated settlements you have got a very clear fencing type, and if I have to make it look as which type of fencing, it will be somewhat like this. So I have got a clear fencing, and here will be having what is called shelters for the livestock caretakers, and here will be having on the pasture so that the movement is not demarcated. So divided ranches and permanent ranches is important characteristics. So which are the important characteristics that I take with commercial livestock rearing? Number one, it is more organized. Number two, it is more capital intensive. Number three, it has got permanent ranches. And number four, the ranches are divided into parcels. So I have got in my diagram 6 parcels altogether so that I can regulate the grazing. And what kind of regulation it is? Regulation talks about when the grass of one parcel is grazed, animals are moved to the another pasture. The number of animals in the pasture is kept in accordance to carrying capacity of the pasture. So it becomes more organized. This is a specialized activity in which only one type of animal is reared. Important animals include sheep, cattle, goats, horses. Products like meat, wool, hide, skin are processed and packed scientifically and exported to different parts of world market. So how do I distinguish the two types of livestock dependent agriculture? One is absolutely primitive, where you don't have capacity to rear your animals, and two is where you are rearing them. And another difference that we can apply is that in one you are only for your self consumption, while in the other it is more about commercial factors. If I go to my flow chart again, nomadism will be for subsistence and rearing can be of commercial purposes. Now commercial livestock ranching, because it's scientific in its nature, there is also emphasis on breeding, genetic improvement, disease control and health care of the animals. New Zealand, Argentina, Australia, Uruguay, USA are the important countries where commercial livestock is being practiced. Entire belt of United States of America, including part of Canada as we are noticing here, is the livestock, commercial livestock ranching, where we have got all the types of animals reared for different types of animal products. So we are not segregating them. But once I come to this part of Campos of Brazil, we are largely talking about beef cattle. However, when I get to this Patagonia of Argentina, I am essentially talking about sheep rearing for its meat and wool production. This area of Llanos is also for the beef cattle rearing. And in the other NCERT you must have talked about or read about alfalfa. Alfalfa grasses are being cultivated to make beef cattle, fattening up of the beef cattle so that a larger amount of flesh can be generated. Similarly, when I take this part of African region, we are having dominant production of beef cattle here. Milch cattle is essentially missing. And the plain of Australia is largely known for its sheep plus milch cattle. So commercial livestock rearing, and this entire belt of Eurasia, you can easily correlate it to goats, you can correlate it to sheep, and there is also the rearing of horses. So areas of commercial livestock rearing includes the developed countries also. I do have Brazil, Argentina, or for that matter Botswana as examples of the countries which are in developing group. So commercial livestock ranching is rearing of animals for a range of animal products. And because it is scientific, we are taking care of health, hygiene, feed, fodder, and there is also incorporation of biotechnology in terms of breed enhancement, in terms of increasing the quality of feed fodder, in terms of increasing the capacity of immunization, vaccination, or the breed enhancement. Like in India, we have mobilized the program of national bovine breeding, wherein there is the attempt to enhance the deteriorated breed quality that we have of our milch cattle. So studied so far, our primary activity as hunting and gathering, which is practiced by very primitive population, leading to, if I just arrange them chronologically, I'll say it has led to the rearing of animals. Rearing of animals can include nomadic rearers or the commercial rearers. But is it completes the primary activities that we are willing to take? No. Comes in number 3, crop culture. Agriculture till very recent times have been essentially related to crop culture. And that is the reason our NCERT also starts with agriculture, with crop culture. But mind it, when we today talk about agriculture, we take into account not just crop culture, but also agriculture means crop cultivation, livestock rearing, aquaculture, silvipasture culture, wherein agriculture can be subsistence or commercial, intensive or extensive, manual labor, or mechanized. So if we have to make sense with agriculture that we will be now proceeding to, need to understand that crop culture must not be considered only to be the example of agriculture in present perspective. If I am cultivating crops for my self-consumption, it is largely likely to be manual labor oriented and it will be intensive. Intensive is largely related to unfavorable land-man ratio, in sense that land holdings are small, and that is the reason I need to practice intensive culture. And we have got the opposing terms to it. Subsistence is essentially intensive and labor centric. Commercial, where you are producing even food crop for the market sale, is extensive and is mechanized, because such big farms cannot be cultivated with manual labor support. So going back to NCERT, we are now picking up agriculture. Which are the two primary activities from NCERT that we have covered? Hunting, gathering, and nomadism with rearing of animals, or livestock centric agriculture. Agriculture is practiced under multiple combination of physical and socio-economic conditions. Based on the methods of farming, different types of crops are grown, livestock raised. There are main agricultural systems which are being focused in NCERT. So subsistence agriculture. What is subsistence agriculture? I'll say subsistence is primitive as well as non-primitive. Now what essentially is the difference between them? We are picking each one of them one by one. Two categories, primitive and intensive subsistence. Intensive subsistence is what I am saying is non-primitive. And characteristics of each one of them one by one. So agriculture is crop cultivation or livestock rearing. And what is the first type of agriculture that we are understanding now is subsistence. And what will be the meaning of subsistence agriculture? I am cultivating crop or rearing animal for my self-consumption. And if it is that I need to further subdivide it, it will be primitive or non-primitive. Now taking NCERT further, the primitive subsistence agriculture is shifting cultivation, widely practiced by many tribes in tropics. Take support of this. In Asia, straightforward question can be made of it. Indonesia and Malaysia, the term applied to denote shifting cultivation is ladang. Jumar is the name in Java Island. Ray in Vietnam. You have to understand them in the range. Tamarai in Thailand. He in Laos. Hanumo in Philippines. Which area we have covered? And you can take on the Tongia of Myanmar as well. So which area we have covered? We have covered Southeast Asia. In Southeast Asia, there are different names with which we apply the shifting agriculture or slash and burn agriculture into. I'm just coming to the details. If I take other location, like I have got Japan and Korea mentioned, so it is East Asia. And I also have Sri Lanka and India mentioned, so I am in South Asia. And the names that are being applied is Chena, Karen, and in our country it is Bevar, Jhoom, Podu. These are the common names that we practice in our country. So in Asia, the term that is applied to denote the shifting agriculture can be a good question for us to take into account. Factual thing, you have to sit with it to understand it. And if I continue with the terms that are being applied to it, we are essentially in Central and South America. And in this we have got different names. The popular ones are milpa in Mexico. So you can notice that in Mexico we have got Cuamail as well as milpa. Milpa is more common, and roca in Brazil. Apart from it, we can also add the name. It is called Conuco in Venezuela. So list is immense. Some names you must be taking into account. And in Africa, it is Masole, Zaire. Zaire is older name of Democratic Republic of Congo. Then we can take the references of other names, that includes Proka in Ghana. That means which are the areas where we are having the practice of this type of agriculture. Shifting agriculture is essentially practiced in the continents of Asia, in Central and South America, and in Africa. Mind it, essentially in wet tropics. And which type of agriculture it is? It is essentially crop cultivation, which is popularly called as slash and burn agriculture. Standing vegetation is being cut down by the primitive population. They burn it, cultivate the land, because they don't have capacity to regenerate or sustain the soil fertility. They leave that land after certain time. That is the reason when I talk about shifting agriculture, we practice shifting or rotation of field rather than crops. Shifting agriculture or primitive subsistence agriculture is essentially crop culture where we rotate the fields practiced essentially by primitive population. And primitive population, this activity is known with different names that we have learned. Going back to NCERT. Mexico, Milpa, Venezuela, Conuco, Brazil, Roca, Southeast Asia, range of names. Tamarai, India, China, largely in northeastern part of India. So area of primitive and entire belt in Africa. The area that we take, Democratic Republic of Congo, we have understood it. So the areas of primitive subsistence agriculture is essentially the wetter type of climate. Remind yourself of the climatic region. I am essentially in equatorial climate. Combined with it, I am essentially in monsoonal climate. So if I use the Köppen's alphabetical symbol, which I believe that we are comfortable with, it is these two climatic regions where we are essentially taking primitive subsistence agriculture. Here we are cultivating crops and rotating fields. And needless to emphasize, it is for self-consumption. Now, if I have to read the characteristics of shifting agriculture from NCERT, so 1, vegetation is usually cleared by fire and the ashes add to the fertility of the soil. Second, I have already talked about, it is also called slash and burn agriculture. Third, agriculture is done with very primitive tools. Next, after some time, essentially 3 to 5 years, the soil loses fertility and farmers shift to another part and clears other patch of the forest for cultivation. The major problem with shifting cultivation is the cycle of zoom becomes less and less due to loss of fertility. It is prevalent in tropical region with a different name, zooming in northeastern state, milpa in Central America, ladang in Indonesia, Malaysia, and the find out further names which we have already learned. So what is the nature of slash and burn agriculture? Slash and burn agriculture is not just primitive agriculture, it is also considered to be non-ecological. Because it is not ecological sustaining. Because when we leave the land fallow for it to regenerate its fertility, it is very likely that the soil erosion will take place. And if I talk about the intensive subsistence agriculture, which we said is non-primitive type, then our NCERT gives us essentially two subdivide of it, intensive subsistence agriculture with paddy and intensive subsistence agriculture without paddy. With paddy, agriculture is characterized by dominance of rice crop. Land holdings are very small due to high density of population. Farmers work with the help of family labor. Please recall the terminology that we have learned. Use of machinery is limited. Farmyard manure is used to maintain the fertility of the soil. Without paddy, we have got largely wheat, soya bean, barley, sorghum, northern China, Manchuria, North Korea, North Japan. In India also we have got wheat cultivation, rabi crop, mostly in western part. What exactly we need to understand with these two types of agriculture essentially is mixed cropping. Mixed cropping is very different from mixed farming, and it essentially correlates with either crop rotation or it goes with intercropping. Crop rotation stands for different season, different crops. Intercropping stands for same season, same field, more than one crop. The only difference therefore that I see between with paddy and without paddy is that with paddy is essentially confined in wet monsoonal area and without paddy is in comparatively colder and drier area. Can I cultivate rice in areas which are colder and drier? No, rice requires warm and wet condition. So when I say without paddy, I am not saying I don't cultivate rice at all, but rice is not the principal crop. And both these are very important mixed cropping zone. Back to NCERT. Intensive subsistence agriculture dominant by paddy and intensive subsistence agriculture dominant by crops other than paddy. And if we have to learn it on map, it will be, we see southern part of China, entire eastern Uttar Pradesh, northeastern states, east coast plain of India, west coast plain of India, complete coastal belt of Vietnam including the delta of Mekong, the fertile deltaic soil in Indonesia, the Luzon Island in Philippines, Taiwan, Japan, Honshu Island, Shikoku and Kyushu Island and Korea Peninsula is essentially which type of mixed cropping? It is paddy, dominance of paddy, and that is the reason we say paddy the staple crop of world, because it is feeding maximum share of humanity, is confined essentially in Asia. And if I have to pick up the rest of the area, whether I am talking about Jammu and Kashmir, Punjab, Haryana, neighboring Pakistan, or the plateau interiors along with Manchurian plains, northern China, Hokkaido island of Japan, which type of mixed cropping we have? It is without paddy. Without paddy essentially relates to crops that can include wheat and soya bean and different other types of food crop. If I continue with the crop culture as agriculture, I can have extensive commercial grain farming as my next type of agriculture. And if I talk about extensive commercial grain farming, it is essentially carried in interior part of semi-arid land. Mind it, we are talking about steppe type of climate. Wheat is principal crop and the crops like corn, barley, oats, rye are also grown. Farms are very large and therefore entire operation is from plowing to harvesting is mechanized. This type of agriculture is best developed in Eurasian steppes, Canadian American prairies, pampas in Argentina, veld in South Africa, downs in Australia, Canterbury plains in New Zealand. See ma'am, how we started with our study of agriculture, that if agriculture is crop culture, I can divide it into 6 set of terms. If it is intensive, it will be manual labor, I am writing labor, and it will be subsistence. If it is extensive, then it will be mechanized and will be commercial. This is how we started with it. So how many we have taken as intensive? Entire monsoonal Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, including Japan. Which type of agriculture we have taken? Intensive, non-primitive, mixed cropping. And now what we are trying to learn? It is extensive mechanized grain farming. So which is the grain that we are essentially cultivating here? It's wheat. And which are the areas where we are cultivating it essentially? So we are cultivating it in prairies of North America, pampas of Argentina, veld of South Africa, Eurasian steppes, Kyrgyz plains, downs of Australia. Which type of agriculture it is? It is extensive, mechanized, commercial. Which type of agriculture is practiced in India? Intensive, labor-oriented subsistence. At this point, we can also have one comparison that can be made. Extensive, commercial, agriculture can have mixed characteristics and can relate to monoculture. What is mixed? It can be two. Mixed cropping, the way we learned it with intensive, and mixed farming, that we'll be learning the next. Essential differences: different types of crops. Crop with livestock. And what is monoculture? Monoculture is single crop per year, as in Canada. Monoculture of wheat. Reason: winter becomes too grim for me to cultivate anything. So there are certain terms which are hidden in NCERT and we should be aware of it. So if I take intensive subsistence, I'm essentially talking about mixed cropping. But when I'm taking extensive commercial, I'm talking about mixed cropping as well as mixed farming. And it is not essentially mixed, it is also monoculture. Because in intensive subsistence agriculture, you are in much favorable natural conditions. Cultivable season prevails throughout the year. Mixed farming is the form of agriculture found in extremely developed part of world. Mixed farms are moderate in size and usually the crops associated are wheat, barley, oat. Fodder crops are an important component. Crop rotation and intercropping play important role in maintaining soil emphasis. Equal emphasis is laid on crop cultivation and animal husbandry. If there is any confusion that has got generated, let us quickly revise before we proceed further. Activity that we are learning right now is primary sector. It includes agriculture, forestry, mining and fishery, where we are not talking about mining right now. And when I say agriculture, I am talking about crop, livestock, aquaculture, and silvipasture culture. Where do I draw the boundary line to distinguish them? If it is livestock, it can be nomadic herding, it can be commercial rearing, and we have yet not learned it can be dairy farming. If it is crop, it can be shifting agriculture, it can be intensive agriculture, with paddy, without paddy, it can be extensive agriculture, which can be mixed cropping, or mixed farming. And mind it, if it is mixed farming, it is livestock plus crop together. NCERT, dairy farming. Dairy is the most advanced and efficient type of rearing of milch cattle. It is highly capital intensive. Animal shed storage facilities for fodder, feeding, milching machines add to the cost of dairy farming. There is essential emphasis that is laid on cattle breeding, healthcare, and veterinary services. How do I distinguish dairy farming from commercial livestock ranching? Is that commercial livestock ranching is with multiple livestock produce, and dairy farming is only for milk. It is highly labor intensive as it involves rigorous care in feeding and milching. It is practiced mainly near urban and industrial center, which provides a neighborhood market for fresh milk and dairy product. We do have development of transportation, refrigeration, and other preservation processes that have increased the duration of the storage of the various dairy products. Three main regions of commercial dairy farming is in Northwest Europe, Canada, and third belt is in Southeast Australia and New Zealand. Denmark, Netherlands, Canada, USA by default. And here it is, Australia, not visible here, Canterbury Plains, Christchurch, and Australia. Major areas of commercial dairy farming. So if I have to take a quick revision of what I have learned I'll simply use this table and will remind myself as agriculture with livestock can be absolutely primitive as nomadic herding, is comparatively commercial with various type of animal products and dairy farming. And if it is with crop, then I have primitive as shifting agriculture. We have got non-primitive as intensive with without paddy, largely giving me mixed cropping, and extensive agriculture, which is commercial agriculture, can give me either multiple cropping or can give me mixed farming. But is it sufficient categories for agriculture? No, there are certain special types of agriculture also. And which are these special types of agriculture? So 1, 2, and 3. What is the special type of agriculture? It will include plantation and Mediterranean agriculture. Let us learn them one by one from NCERT. The plantation agriculture includes tea, coffee, cocoa, rubber, cotton, oil palm, sugarcane, banana, pineapples. Here I want to distinguish the two types which is not clearly mentioned in our NCERT. Plantation includes traditional and non-traditional categories. Now, which type of agriculture plantation agriculture is? It is also essentially crop culture. We are cultivating crop. But the crops are cultivated which will give us yield. The same plant tends to give us yield. If for 20 to 30 years, then it is traditional. and if it is providing me yield for 2 to 3 cropping season, then it is non-traditional. This is very important, and that difference should be clear with us. So if I say what makes plantation agriculture a special type of agriculture in spite of the fact that it is related to cultivation of crop, is that when I am harvesting plantation crop, I don't deroot the plant. Same plant tends to give me yield for longer time, and that is the reason what makes it special type. I'll just talk about it. And if I have to categorize their products, I can grade them into 2 categories which we have learned. And if I have to segregate them, if I pick up cotton, if I pick up sugar cane, if I pick up pineapples, I am largely putting them into non-traditional categories. But if it is tea, coffee, cocoa, rubber, oil palm, banana, it will fall into traditional category. What makes it special type? It is special type because I need special scientific methods of cultivation for crop stand, for harvesting, for weed control. If I don't have that capacity, I'll not be cultivating it well. It's capital investment, single crop specialization, cheap labor, good system of transportation, because it is which type of agriculture? It is commercial agriculture, and it is largely attributed to colonial settlers. Rubber plantation of Malaysia, tea gardens of India, Sri Lanka, banana plantation of West Indies, these all are examples of plantation agriculture. So which type of agriculture plantation is? If I take the constituent, I'll say it is crop type. But if I say the technique of its cultivation is very different from other crop type cultivation, whether I talk about multiple cropping with intensive category or of commercial. The Mediterranean agriculture is another specialized type of commercial agriculture. What makes it commercial and specialized? Citrus fruits. Viticulture or grape cultivation is specialty of Mediterranean region. Mediterranean region, you are actually attaining the name from Mediterranean Sea. So Europe, North Africa, from Tunisia to Atlantic coast, South California, wherever you have got, I am purposefully using Köppen's alphabetical symbol, CS type of climate. Mediterranean, dry summers. So viticulture is an important type. Mediterranean agriculture is essentially known for gardens of world. They are known for cultivation of different varieties of horticultural products. When we talk about horticulture, we essentially take into account the market gardening, which is also mentioned in our NCERT. Let us take it first before I take you to the diagram. In the continuity of study of Mediterranean agriculture, if I pick up market gardening and horticulture, so market gardening and horticulture specializes in the cultivation of high value crop, essentially fruits, flowers, vegetables, solely for urban market. So if I say what type of agriculture Mediterranean agriculture is, I'll say it is related to horticulture. But then horticulture is also correlated to market gardening. And when we talk about it as commercially viable, there are other terms which are being applied as truck farming. Vegetable cultivation from the close vicinity to be delivered to the neighboring market area. Farming. Agriculture or reproductive industry includes subsistence farming and commercial farming. Intensive, primitive. Intensive can be with or without paddy. Primitive is shifting cultivation, nomadic herding. Commercial grain, mixed farming. And in place of plantation, I'll say specialized. And specialized will include A, plantation, B, Mediterranean, and C, horticulture with truck farming. Also, horticulture is growing vegetable, fruits, flowers. Sericulture is commercial rearing of silkworm. Pisciculture is breeding of fish, essentially part and parcel of aquaculture. And we have taken already viticulture, the cultivation of grapes. Some primary activities which by default can be given some specialized name, and don't miss to read out agriculture. It is act of cultivation on soil, raising crop and rearing livestock. I am talking about what? Mixed farming. Is every agriculture mixed farming? No, it can be mixed cropping as well. I hope it has become much more clearer for us. Any type, I can take it in the technique base, I can take it with the composition base, I can take it on the basis of location. But agriculture, without any doubt, incorporate cultivation of crops, rearing of animals, and also aquaculture. NCERT also mentions, though it is now not that prominent, the cooperative farming. That is, the group of farmers forms cooperative society by pooling in their resource voluntary for the efficient farming. Like we have got NDDBs, Operation Flood, Successful Dairy Cooperative. The cooperative societies help farmers to produce all important input of farming, sell the produce in most favorable terms. So it essentially helps the poor farmers or landless laborers. Another type that is mentioned in our NCERT is collective farming. The basic principle behind this type of farming is based on the social ownership. So it actually comes from erstwhile Soviet Union. Just like cooperative farming, the farmers pool all their resources like land, livestock, labor. However, they are allowed to retain some plots to grow crop in order to meet their daily requirements. Actually, cooperative farmings are still relevant. And whenever today we talk about our landless laborers or marginal farmers, we are essentially talking about cooperative farming. So dairy cooperative, rubber cooperative, sugar cooperative are the essential examples, successful example of cooperative farming in our country. Dairy essentially goes in Gujarat, rubber Kerala, no price for guessing, and sugar in Maharashtra. These are an important examples of successful implementation of the practices. So primary activities includes hunting, gathering, livestock centric agriculture, which can include nomadic herding, commercial rearing of animals, and dairy culture. It also includes crop culture, that can be shifting, intensive agriculture, you can call it non-primitive, and extensive commercial agriculture, which is actually talking about both mixed cropping and mixed farming. And the specialized type of agriculture are plantation and Mediterranean agriculture. Mediterranean agriculture cannot be made complete without mentioning horticulture. Take revision of this chapter with this support. I hope it will help you in your revision and understanding of the things. Happy learning and all the very best to all of you.